All the time, Darren and I get asked, well, how do you raise better soybeans? Where it starts is you got to pick the right soybean variety. But Darren, I think that's challenging. Well, actually, I know it's challenging. That's why I make Darren do it for our farm.
You make Darren do it? I don't know. You know, you have to love what you're doing. One thing I do love doing is looking at different varieties of soybeans because there's so many things that you have to choose from. Just like in corn, we want to look at those defensive traits that we absolutely have to have. That's just critical if you want to be successful with soybeans. Then we can start looking at which beans are going to be more offensive and what management techniques we can use.
Yeah, but Darren, I want the highest yield. Which one's going to yield highest this year?
I do want the highest yield, you know, and I can't tell you if 2015 is going to be a wet year, a dry year, a hot year, a cold year. So we've got to look across a variety of environments. For example, in 2014, we had a lot of disease issues. We had white mold, we had sudden death syndrome, we had some other things showing up as well. We've got to start with a good seed treatment. That's going to kind of even the playing field out for a lot of these varieties. So if we start with a good seed treatment, we can wipe out some of the early season disease and insect problems that we would normally face. Otherwise, though, we have to have good soybean cyst nematode varieties for those environments. We saw some guys that were pushing non-cyst resistant varieties into areas where they shouldn't. They definitely paid a yield penalty this year.
All right, so you talked about diseases a little bit. Every company rates their varieties a little different for diseases. So how do I sort that out? If I'm looking at 3 different companies, their soybeans, how do I know if this particular one is better than the other company's variety?
Well, that's tough to do. And the other thing is when they're making the ratings, like on sudden death syndrome this year, we saw it in some areas of the country and other areas we didn't. And in fact, right across the road, we may see the same variety planted a week different, and the early planted stuff had sudden death, the late planted stuff did not. Now, if we only had the one field, we'd say, wow, that variety is fantastic on sudden death syndrome. We didn't see any, and there's a whole bunch in the area. However, we did see it where it was planted early, and it had sudden death just like the rest of them. So we've got to find the right environments for where that disease is present in order to make good recommendations for those varieties.
All right, how about the plant type? Does it really make a difference if I'm on narrow rows or wide rows?
All right, well, that is where I really see a difference in soybean varieties. What I'm looking at is soybean varieties that are going to bush out and have lots of branches with lots of pods on them. And when you break those side branches off and start stacking them up, and you say, wow, if I had one single stem soybean plant, I would have to be 7 feet tall in order to get the yield I'm getting out of the 2-foot tall bushy soybean variety. And then when we look at row spacing, we definitely see as we move further north in the country a response to narrowing up that row spacing. So we have to find varieties that can handle tight row spacing in order to maximize yield potential.
Last thing, how many of these new varieties should I be planting, and how many varieties total should I put on the farm?
Depending on the size of your farm, maybe 3 or 4 varieties is a manageable number. Maybe you may want some more difference in maturity zones or something to spread out your harvest a little bit. That's just a few of the things that you have to consider for your farm. Then as far as planting new varieties, I love planting new varieties. It's very rare that I'll hold on to a variety more than 2 or maybe 3 years because the ones that are coming are better. That's the reason seed companies are bringing them out.
The last thing I would say is a lot of people are looking for a low price on soybeans because commodity prices are down, and I get that, and as long as it's yielding pretty close to another variety, that's fine. But if you've got another variety, even if it costs $8 or $10 more, if you get 2 to 4 bushels more, it more than paid for itself. So just look real close at that.
When it comes to picking soybean varieties, many farmers may choose the right variety based on what weed control options there are to kill weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what'll stop this tough weed coming up next.